The biting cold of Blackwood Hollow was no stranger to Luna. It seeped into her bones, a constant reminder of the hard life, a daily grind that stretched on like a never-ending saga. The houses, made of mud and rough stones, seemed to bend under the weight of snow and hopelessness. It was a place where the sun rarely seemed to linger, and the shadow of debt stretched longer than any winter. Luna, at 19, already carried the weight of an entire existence on her bowed shoulders and frail, chronically ill body. Every breath was an effort, a wheezing that had been her constant companion since she could remember, and which made her useless for the heavy labor that kept the village alive. She was the fragile one, the one who needed care, not the one who gave it. But there was a ray of sunshine in her life. Ilara, her younger sister, just 12 years old, was the personification of spring amidst the harsh winter. Her light brown hair framed an innocent face, her eyes bright and full of curiosity, always ready with a smile that warmed Luna's heart more than any hearth fire. Ilara didn't know the true extent of Luna's illness, or perhaps she chose to ignore it, seeing only the sister who protected her, who told stories, and who, somehow, always managed to find an extra ripe fruit or a piece of bread for her. Ilara was hope, the reason Luna clung to life tooth and nail, even when her body seemed ready to give up. That day, however, the shadow hanging over the village was not that of the mountain, but of a much more real threat. The sound of heavy hooves and creaking wheels cut through the morning silence. It was not a common sound, and a chill snaked down Luna's spine. It wasn't long before the royal carriage, imposing and black as night, stopped in Blackwood Hollow's central square. Behind it, Lycan knights, corpulent and intimidating figures, rode their horses with the bearing of those who wield absolute power. Ray Lycan. Lycan's tax collectors had arrived, and with them, the certainty of trouble. The villagers huddled, pale faces and downcast eyes, as if merely looking at those figures could cost them their very souls. Luna felt her heart hammered in her chest, a frantic beat that seemed desperate to escape her ribcage. She gripped Ilara's hand tightly, feeling the small hand tremble in hers. Lord Valerius, the king's astute advisor, descended from the carriage with an air of superiority that made Luna's stomach churn. His icy blue eyes swept the crowd before settling on the two sisters. Luna and Ilara, daughters of Elias of Blackwood, Valerius's voice echoed, cold and authoritative. Your father's debts to Ray Lycan are unpayable. He is gone, but the debt remains. And as the kingdom of Eldoria tolerates no defaulters, one of you will be taken as collateral. No, she whispered, her voice weak, almost inaudible, but filled with a fury that only sisterly love could ignite. She knew what that meant. To be taken as collateral for Castello Licanera was not just a matter of forced labor. It was a life sentence, permanent servitude, a loss of freedom that was worse than death. And Ilara, so young, so vibrant, could not face such a destiny. Ilara, Valerius continued, ignoring Luna's plea, you are the younger, the more able to serve longer. Come with us. Two Lycan guards approached, their giant shadows falling over little Ilara. The girl let out a muffled cry, her eyes wide with terror, and clung to Luna like a limpet. No, Luna, don't let me go, she begged, tears streaming down her face. Luna's despair was palpable, but her body, that body that betrayed her at every turn, seemed useless. She coughed, a violent cough that made her double over, the taste of copper in her mouth. The villagers watched in silence, helpless, unable to intervene against the power of Ray Lycan. But as the cough tore through her chest, a fire, an incandescent ember, ignited in Luna's eyes. She might be physically weak, but her soul was forged from steel. She would not allow it. She would not let Ilara be taken. With a determination that surprised even herself, Luna broke free from the guards who were already trying to drag Ilara away. She stumbled, fell in the snow, but rose with a strength that seemed to come from another world. Her eyes, once clouded by sickness, now burned with unyielding resolve. She threw herself in front of the royal carriage, arms outstretched, her fragile body like a dry branch against a storm. "Stop!" Her voice, though still weak, carried an unexpected authority. "Take me, take me. I offer my life in exchange for Ilara's freedom. I give myself to Lycan to settle the debt." A sepulchral silence fell over Blackwood Hollow. The collectors, accustomed to submission, were shocked by the audacity of the sick girl. Ilara sobbed, trying to pull her sister back, but Luna was unyielding. She stood there, trembling from the cold and the effort, the icy snow on her knees, her chest heaving, but with an indomitable flame burning in her gaze. At that instant, a movement in the carriage drew everyone's attention. The door opened with a sinister creak, and a figure descended from his black mount. It was neither one of the guards nor Lord Valerius. It was Lycan himself. A tower of muscle and menace, over 7 feet tall, he exuded an aura of power that made the air hum. His deep amber eyes swept the scene, stopping on the trembling girl in the snow, who was coughing, yet staring at him with a fire he knew well. To everyone's surprise, a slow, predatory smile spread across Lycan's lips. It was not a gentle smile, but a satisfied grin, one that knew it had gotten exactly what it wanted. He had been watching her for months, from the shadows of the kingdom, and knew that Luna would never accept being bought. She would only come to him through sacrifice. And he had moved heaven and earth, orchestrating the debt situation, just to force this very moment. The silence that followed Luna's audacity was more deafening than any scream, cut only by the impatient whinny of Lycan's mount and the dry sound of leather reins being released. The royal carriage, a colossus of dark wood and polished steel, stopped abruptly, its wheels locking in the snow and raising a cloud of frozen flakes. From there, or rather, from his imposing black mount that seemed made of shadows, Lycan descended, a figure who dominated the scene with unquestionable authority, the kind that makes your heart leap and the air thin. A colossal shadow projected itself over the snow, swallowing the pale winter light. He didn't walk. He radiated, each step a tremor in the frozen earth. Over 2 meters tall, a tower of dense muscle that moved with a wild grace, he was the personification of danger and power. The villagers, who moments before had been murmuring amongst themselves, were now petrified, their eyes wide with terror and reverence, like children terrified of a boogeyman. He was the supreme alpha, the king of Eldoria, and his presence was a burden, a pressure on the lungs of all present. Luna, still prostrate in the dirty snow, coughing uncontrollably, felt the icy air tear at her lungs. Each breath was agony, but her eyes, clouded by fever and exhaustion, held a stubborn flame, a silent defiance that not even death could extinguish. Her desperation for her sister, Ilara, was a fire that consumed her, yet also kept her upright, or rather on her knees, defying fate. She saw the king's eyes, a penetrating gold that seemed to see through her soul, fix on her. It was a gaze that could freeze blood in veins, but to her surprise, it held none of the fury she expected. For Lycan, this moment was the culmination of centuries of waiting, of a quest that had spanned countless moons. His inner wolf, an ancient and patient beast, roared in recognition. Luna's scent was an ancestral melody, the perfume of her soul, the call of his destiny. It was an aroma of jasmine and damp earth, of resilience and fragility, resonating deep within his being, awakening a primal possessiveness that transcended reason and politics. He felt the mate bond ignite, a spark he had nurtured and protected even before her birth. She was his mate, his everything. And finally she was there, before him, offering herself in sacrifice. The plan had worked with a perfection that bordered on the poetic. He stopped a few feet from her, his shadow covering her completely. The contrast was stark. He, an unshakable colossus. She, a fragile, sickly petal on the verge of collapse. But there was something about Luna that drew him, a silent strength, an innate dignity he had observed for months. His golden eyes, once tempestuous with the fury of being interrupted, now shone with cruel satisfaction, almost a triumph. And then, to the surprise and horror of all present, the king smiled. It was not a gentle smile, but a predatory, satisfied grin, a smile that revealed sharp teeth and an intention that chilled the spines of the Lycan guards and the villagers. It was the smile of a hunter who had finally cornered his most prized quarry. "Done," Lycan's voice boomed, a low, resonant thunder that cut through the icy air, irrevocably sealing the agreement. The word echoed, laden with a weight Luna couldn't fully comprehend. It was a sentence, a contract, and the promise of an uncertain future. Before anyone could react, he bent down. Not delicately, but with the precision of a predator. His dark cloak, made of heavy fabric that seemed to swallow light itself, enveloped Luna's fragile body. It was a quick, almost possessive gesture, lifting her from the snow. She was enveloped by the warmth of the fabric and his scent, a mix of leather, forest, and untamed power that made her faintly dizzy, but not before feeling the firmness of the arms that held her. The world spun, and Luna felt suspended, her weak body contrasting with the inhuman strength that supported her. In Lycan's arms, she was an insignificant weight, but to him, she was the most precious treasure. That gesture, which to others was a brutal display of possession, was to the king a protection. He had enveloped her in his essence, in his dominion, declaring her his before heavens and earth. The Lycan guards, witnessing the scene, exchanged confused glances, but dared not question the alpha. Lord Valerius, the king's astute advisor, watching closely, felt a shiver of distrust run down his spine. There was something more there, something he couldn't decipher, and the presence of that fragile human was already a threat to the Lycan hierarchy. Luna was taken, not to a dungeon, as her deepest fear whispered, but to a destiny she could barely conceive. Life in Blackwood Hollow, with its debts and its misery, had ended in that instant. That encounter was the turning point, transforming Luna's life forever and revealing Lycan's obsessive and possessive nature. What did he truly plan for her? How would she survive this new and dangerous world of wolves, intrigues, and a king who had hunted her with the patience of a millennia-old predator? The suspense was palpable, and Eldoria's winter seemed to have just begun for Luna. The cold night air of Eldoria whipped her face as the royal carriage pulled away from Blackwood Hollow, carrying Luna towards an uncertain destiny. The sound of wheels on the packed snow was the only noise breaking the heavy silence inside the vehicle, a silence that screamed to Luna the irreversibility of her choice. She huddled in the corner, her eyes fixed on the disappearing landscape, each tree, each hill, a farewell to the world she knew. Her body trembled not just from the biting cold, but from the mix of fear and a strange, almost imperceptible spark of hope. What awaited her at Castello Licanera? The image of a dark, damp, cold dungeon, where she would be forced into exhaustive labor that her fragile body could never withstand, was the only certainty Luna's mind could formulate. She saw herself chained, a servant, a slave, paying her father's debt with every drop of sweat and every gasping breath, until the illness consumed her completely. Despair tightened its grip on her chest, but the image of Alara, safe and free, was the anchor that kept her from collapsing. She had done what she had to do, and that was what mattered. The carriage, heavy and imposing, cut through the snow with surprising speed, as if the black horses pulling it were driven by an invisible force. Luna watched the sparse lights of Blackwood Hollow vanish on the horizon, swallowed by the darkness of the dense forest, that marked the borders between human and Lycan territories. The scent of pine and wet earth gave way to a wilder aroma, of animals and untouched nature, which made her feel even smaller and more vulnerable. The trees grew taller, older, their twisted branches looking like dark claws against the night sky. With each mile traveled, the feeling of entering a forbidden world intensified. The kingdom of Eldoria was vast, but the Lycan lands were shrouded in legends and fear. Tales of giant werewolves and shape-shifting beings populated the villagers' minds, and Luna, despite her intelligence, was not immune to these stories. She remembered her mother whispering about Lycan, an ancient and feared being, who ruled with an iron fist and whose golden eyes could see into people's souls. And now, she was going straight to him, like a lamb to the slaughter. The hours dragged on, and exhaustion began to weigh on her already weakened limbs. Her cough, her constant companion, assailed her in short, painful fits, reminding her of the fragility of her existence. She wondered if she would survive the journey, let alone what came next. After what felt like an eternity, the carriage finally slowed, and a distant flash of lights broke the night's darkness. Castello Licanara appeared before her, an imposing and dark silhouette against the starry sky. It wasn't just a fortress. It was a mountain of carved stone, with towers that scraped the clouds and walls that seemed to defy time. Oil lamps and torches glowed in every window and tower, revealing a grand and ancient architecture, far beyond anything Luna had ever imagined. Blackwood Hollow, with its humble and rustic constructions, seemed like a child's doodle compared to that masterpiece of power and intrigue. The massive oak and iron gate creaked open, swallowing the carriage and Luna inside. She expected to be dragged to a dark and cold dungeon, perhaps to a damp cell where the stench of mold and despair would be her only comfort. Instead, the carriage stopped in a lit courtyard, and a group of servants wearing impeccable uniforms awaited her arrival. One of them, a man with a gentle smile, opened the door for her. "Welcome to Castello Licanara, Miss Luna," he said, his voice soft, without any trace of threat. That already tied her mind in knots. Luna stepped down from the carriage, her legs slightly wavering, and was led not downwards, but upwards, through wide, richly decorated corridors. Heavy tapestries adorned the walls, aromatic candles burned in golden candelabras, and the floor was covered by soft carpets that muffled the sound of her steps. The scent of incense and polished wood replaced the mold and earth she had expected. She was taken to a room that was larger than her father's entire house in Blackwood Hollow. A canopy bed with silk curtains, a wardrobe filled with fine clothes she would never dream of wearing, a crackling fireplace that warmed the room to a pleasant temperature, and to her surprise, an adjacent bathroom with a gigantic marble bathtub. "Prepare a warm bath for the young lady and bring her something to eat," the servant instructed, before withdrawing, leaving Luna alone with two maids who seemed more like ladies-in-waiting than servants. She couldn't believe what she saw. Was this a dream? A very elaborate trap? She felt like an imposter amid such luxury. The warm bath was a revelation. The perfumed water eased the tension in her muscles, cleaned the road's grime, and washed away the feeling of misery that had accompanied her for years. The maids helped her into a soft silk nightgown and served her a plentiful and delicious meal, very different from the watery porridge and stale bread she was accustomed to. "Miss, Dr. Isolde will come to see you shortly," one of the maids informed her, with a gentle smile. Luna's confusion only grew, and she could barely disguise her astonishment. The next day, after a night of restorative sleep on a mattress that felt made of clouds, Luna was invited to explore the castle. Guided by one of the maids, she expected to be taken to some work area, or perhaps to a hall where she would await orders. Instead, the maid led her through a series of corridors to an imposing carved oak door. "This is the royal library, miss," the maid announced, opening the door. Luna almost fell backward. What revealed itself before her was not just a room, but a sanctuary. Dark wooden shelves, from floor to ceiling, stretched in every direction, filled with books of all sizes and colors. The intoxicating scent of ancient parchment, leather, and paper enveloped her, an aroma that to her was more precious than any perfume. That sanctuary of knowledge proved a balm for Luna's soul, each shelf a silent invitation to immerse herself in distant worlds. She ran her fingers over the spines of the books, feeling the texture of the leather and the promise of untold stories. It was a refuge, a corner where the chronic illness that had always accompanied her seemed to diminish, where the weight of the debt and the longing for Alara could be momentarily forgotten. But the bubble of tranquility didn't last long. A sharp clang of boots on the stone floor echoed down the main corridor, breaking the reverent silence of the place. A Lycan guard, imposing and with the bearing of one who took their duties seriously, appeared at the entrance, his golden eyes fixed on her. "Luna, the Ray Lycan request your presence in the great hall." His voice was a controlled growl, leaving no room for argument. Her heart leaped, a mix of apprehension and the strange excitement that the Ray Lycan's presence always provoked. The castello, she realized, was a labyrinth of beauty and peril, where every step was calculated and every glance an assessment. Guided by the sentinel, Luna traversed sumptuous corridors, whose ancient tapestries and ancestral crests narrated the millennium-old history of Castello Lycanera and the kingdom of Eldoria. The great hall was a spectacle unto itself, with its vaulted ceilings and enormous windows that revealed the vastness of the forests. But it wasn't the architecture that held her attention, but the glares. Dozens of Lycans, of various ranks and lineages, observed her with a mix of curiosity, distrust, and even a veiled contempt. Alphas and betas, with their imposing auras and defined muscles, formed circles of power, and Luna, a fragile human, was a glaring anomaly in that sea of predators. She felt the heat rise to her face, the irritating cough beginning to tickle her throat, but she forced herself to hold her head high. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. In the center of the hall, as expected, stood the Ray Lycan. His figure was a bulwark of power and authority. His broad shoulders and impressive height made the other Lycans seem like mere boys next to him. Beside him, with a calculating expression and eyes that seemed to dissect every fiber of Luna's being, stood Lord Valerius. The advisor, a Lycan of ancient lineage and notorious cunning, made no effort to disguise his skepticism. His thin lips barely moved, but the gaze he cast upon Luna was a clear challenge to the Ray's decision to bring a human, and a sickly one at that, into the heart of Castello Lycanera. He seemed to think, "What folly is this? A sick commoner? Where has such a thing ever been seen in our castello?" The tension was palpable, like a taut thread about to snap. The Ray, however, seemed oblivious to his advisor's disapproval. His eyes, an intense gold, met Luna's, and a subtle smile, almost imperceptible to the others, danced on his lips. It was a smile that promised and threatened simultaneously, a smile that only Luna seemed to understand. He took a step forward, and the simple action made all the other Lycans recoil slightly. The Ray Lycan's presence was overwhelming, a force of nature. "My Luna," he uttered, his deep, resonant voice echoing through the hall. The possessiveness was evident in every syllable, a clear warning to anyone who dared question his choice. He extended his hand to her, a gesture that seemed to tear down the invisible barriers that separated her from the rest of the court. Luna hesitated for a second, then, as if by an uncontrollable impulse, placed her small hand in the Ray's enormous, strong palm. The heat emanating from him was comforting and terrifying at once. She was his, and he was making that perfectly clear to all in the castle. During the days that followed, Luna began to unravel the complex cogs of the kingdom of Eldoria and the rigid Lycan hierarchy. Life in Castello Lycanera was governed by ancestral customs and an almost military discipline. Alphas were the leaders, betas their seconds in command, and below them, an intricate web of positions and responsibilities. daily physical training, rituals honoring the moon, and unquestioning obedience to the ray were the routine. Luna, with her human fragility, was an outlier, and this generated looks of disdain and hushed murmurs. Lord Valerius, in particular, never missed an opportunity to cast a sidelong glance at her. His eyes narrowed to slits, as if waiting for the moment she would fail. He seemed to harbor a deep-seated animosity towards her, as if her presence was a blemish on the kingdom's perfection. It was in one of these moments of isolation, while trying to decipher an ancient scroll in the royal library, that Dr. Isolde approached. The principal healer of Castello Lycanara, an ancient Lycan with wise eyes, had an aura of calm that contrasted with the castle's constant tension. "Don't listen to them, child," Isolde said, her voice soft as a balm. "They do not understand what destiny has intertwined. To them, you are an intruder, a weakness for the Supreme Alpha. But to us, who understand the signs, you are the destined mate." Luna looked at her, confused. "Destined mate? What does that mean?" Isolde smiled, a gentle smile that reached her eyes. "It's the bond, Luna, the mate bond. It's a soul bond, forged by the moon goddess, far stronger than anything you can imagine. For Lycans, finding their mate is the most crucial event of their lives. It's the other half of our soul, the balance to our being. Your ray Lycan has waited for you for centuries, do you understand? It's our foundation, what makes us complete. And the fact that you are human doesn't negate this. On the contrary, it makes it even more special and rare." Isolde explained to Luna that the presence of a human mate was rare, but not unheard of, and that the strength of the bond transcended species. "That is why the ray protects you so fiercely. To him, you are life itself. And anyone who dares threaten you, threatens him and the stability of the kingdom of Eldoria. They might even see you as a weakness, but to the ray, you are his greatest strength." Dr. Isolde's words began to unravel a world of understanding for Luna. From that moment on, Castello Lycanara transformed into a sanctuary of healing for Luna, with Dr. Isolde taking on the task with a dedication bordering on obsession. The principal healer, an ancient and wise Lycan, delved into the young human's symptoms with an intensity Luna had never seen before, blending Lycan medical science with a touch of intuition that only age and experience could bestow. Days turned into weeks, and Luna's room, which once felt like a place of captivity, became a refuge, filled with the aroma of exotic herbs and the soft murmur of ancestral rituals Dr. Isolde performed. However, as Dr. Isolde delved deeper into her investigations, a disquieting doubt began to sprout in her mind. Luna's chronic illness, which weakened her and made her cough into the snow, didn't quite fit any ailment known in Lycan or human treatises. It wasn't a common fever, nor an organic weakness that even the most potent herbs could dispel at once. It seemed to be something more complex, more deeply rooted, as if Luna's body was in constant conflict with an internal force, or reacting to an invisible presence. "It's a different sort of thing, my dear," Dr. Isolde murmured, her ancient eyes fixed on Luna. "Your body is like a river trying to find a new bed, but something blocks its path." Dr. Isolde began to employ Lycan healing methods Luna could never have imagined. She used rare herbs, gathered from secret locations within the kingdom of Eldoria, some smelling strongly of wet earth, others with the sweetness of wild honey. Concoctions were made under specific moon phases, and the teas Luna drank had a strange yet comforting flavor that seemed to warm her bones from the inside. There were also the rituals, soft and mysterious, where Dr. Isolde chanted in an ancient tongue, passing her hands over Luna's body, as if trying to realign energies or whisper secrets to the young woman's cells. Luna felt a gentle vibration, a kind of electric tingling that left her exhausted, yet simultaneously with a sense of renewal. It was as if, for the first time, her body was being heard and answered. Gradually, Luna began to feel a change. The cough subsided. The constant fatigue gave way to surprising glimpses of energy. Her pale cheeks gained a soft flush, and her eyes, once often clouded by weariness, now shone with a new clarity. For the first time in her life, she felt a glimpse of well-being, a sensation that her body was no longer a prison, but a vessel that could, perhaps, grow strong. "It's like I'm waking up from a very long sleep," she confided to Dr. Isolde one day, her lips curving into a faint but genuine smile. The healer smiled back, her eyes filled with a wisdom that seemed to transcend time. As she worked, Dr. Isolde shared ancient legends and stories, told by the flickering light of Luna's room fireplace. She spoke of humans with special gifts, of forgotten lineages that possessed a deeper connection to the Earth's magic and to the mate bond itself. "Not every human is just human, Luna," she explained, her nimble fingers blending a new ointment. "Some are like bridges between worlds, their bodies responding to calls most don't even perceive. And the mate bond, that's an even greater mystery. It can both heal and sicken, depending on how souls align." She hinted that Luna's body wasn't just reacting to a common illness, but perhaps to something intrinsic to her very essence, something Lycan seemed to understand perfectly. Lycan, a tower of muscle and danger, observed Luna's progress with a silent intensity that made her feel both protected and exposed. He didn't enter the room often, but Luna felt his presence, knew he was always near, an imposing shadow on the periphery of her new reality. When he did appear, his eyes, which seemed like abysses of gold, analyzed every detail of her improvement, and an almost imperceptible glimmer of satisfaction flickered in them. He provided everything necessary for her recovery, from the rarest ingredients for Dr. Isolde's potions to the softest clothes and most nutritious meals, without her ever needing to ask. His generosity was overwhelming, and the depth of his care undeniable, revealing a side of him the world feared, but which, to Luna, showed an almost reverent devotion. Despite the physical improvement and unprecedented comfort, Luna's mind was in a whirlwind. Dr. Isolde's words, the stories about gifts and bonds, Lycan's obsessive care, everything added up to an enigma she was only just beginning to decipher. She began to question the nature of her own condition. Was it truly just an illness, or was there something more in her lineage, a secret that connected her to the Lycan world in a way she'd never imagined? And the Ray, why had he moved heaven and earth to have her under his care? It wasn't merely charity, nor simple attraction. There was something deeper, something fated, that he seemed to know, and she was only just beginning to feel, an intricate web he had woven even before their paths crossed. Luna felt there was much more to her story than she'd imagined, and that Castello Lycanara held secrets on the verge of being revealed. Despite all the wonder and luxury surrounding her within the ancient walls of Castello Lycanara, Luna's mind stubbornly drifted away, past the imposing gates and dense forests of the kingdom of Eldoria, straight to the dust and daily grind of Blackwood Hollow. Every lavish meal, every warm bath, every new book in the royal library, though bringing unprecedented relief to her chronically ill body, came with a tightness in her chest, a pang of guilt that reminded her of Alara. Her younger sister, so full of life and innocence, remained there, likely making do with what little they had, feeling the absence that she, Luna, had left behind. The distance between them felt like an abyss, and the comfort Lycan provided, though life-saving, couldn't erase the image of Alara, alone, in the impoverished village. Lycan, with his keen perception and obsession that seemed to permeate every fiber of his being, soon noticed the melancholy nestled in Luna's eyes, even when she smiled or lost herself in one of the ancient tomes. He was a tower of muscle and danger, a supreme alpha feared by all, but for his mate, his small and fragile Luna, he was a reader of souls. His golden eyes, which could freeze the bravest of warriors, softened upon seeing her pensive, and he knew, with the brutal certainty of his Lycan instinct, that her worry was connected to her family, to that village from which he had rescued her. without Luna needing to utter a word. Orders were given. Lycan messengers, swift and silent as shadows, were dispatched to Blackwood Hollow. Not just to ensure Alara's safety, but to deliver the official news. Luna's family debt had been forgiven, wiped forever from the kingdom's records, as if it had never existed. It was an act of power and tenderness, a silent gesture to soothe his mate's heart, ensuring little Alara wouldn't suffer the consequences of the past. Yet, even with the debt forgiven and the promise of royal protection, life in Blackwood Hollow continued to be a challenge. Luna's absence, who for Alara was more than a sister, she was a mother, a protector, a compass, left an immense void. The village missed the girl who, despite her physical fragility, always found a way to help, to bring a little hope. Alara, with her large, curious eyes, felt that absence more than anyone. Nights grew longer, days emptier. She overheard neighbors' whispers, stories that Luna had been taken to Castello Lycanera, to live with the feared Rey Lycan. For some, it was a glorious destiny. For Alara, it was a nightmare. She pictured her sister, sick and frail, imprisoned in some dark dungeon, suffering at the hands of the monster everyone called the Supreme Alpha. Alara's innocence couldn't conceive of the library, the healers, the obsessed king who loved her. To her, the castle was a prison, and Luna was in danger. The thought of her sister in peril gnawed at Alara's soul. Driven by a love that rivaled Luna's own courage, the girl began to hatch a plan. It was naive, yes, typical of a child who saw the world in black and white, but the determination was pure. She gathered a few breadcrumbs she'd managed to save, a water skin, and an old blanket. Her goal? To escape Blackwood Hollow, cross the forests, and somehow rescue Luna from the feared Castello Lycanera. The chosen night was dark and moonless, perfect for a small figure to slip out of the village unnoticed. With her heart pounding in her chest, Alara squeezed through a gap in the wooden fence that bordered the village, taking a deep breath of the cold night air. Every step was uncertain, every shadow seemed a monster, but the image of Luna, sick and alone, propelled her forward. She didn't know the way, had no map, but the unwavering loyalty running through her veins was her guide. Her attempt, brave as it was, lasted but a short while. Tiny hands and legs couldn't compete with the vastness and dangers of the kingdom of Eldoria. A Lycan patrol, routinely monitoring the areas near Blackwood Hollow on Rey Lycan's orders, found her huddled beneath a tree, trembling with cold and fear, yet still clutching her small bundle of provisions. News of Alara's attempted escape reached Rey Lycan's ears with lightning speed. Lord Valerius, always alert to any disturbance that might affect the kingdom's stability, or the king's new favorite, brought the details with ill-disguised disapproval. He saw Alara's actions as insubordination, a reckless audacity that deserved punishment. But Rey Lycan was not like Lord Valerius. He listened to the story with a predatory, satisfied smile that spread across his imposing face. There was no anger in his golden eyes, only a glint of admiration. That girl, so small and fragile, possessed the same untamed courage, the same fierce loyalty he so loved in Luna. It was a perfect reflection of his mate's inner strength, living proof of the unbreakable spirit of the family that was now part of his own. Instead of punishment, Rey Lycan doubled down on protection. He dispatched a detachment of elite Lycan guards to Blackwood Hollow, not merely to protect Alara from herself and external dangers, but to ensure her daily well-being. They would be there to monitor her, yes, but also to ensure she had food, shelter, and everything she needed, acting as protective shadows, invisible, yet ever present. When news of Alara's actions, and consequently Rey Lycan's measures, reached Luna, she felt a whirlwind of emotions. Overwhelming relief flooded her chest knowing Alara was safe, and that the king, her alpha, had reacted with such magnanimity. But alongside the relief came a sharp pang of guilt. Her sacrifice, though it had saved Alara from the debt, had left her in a position of dependency, uncertainty, and now, constant worry, to the point where the girl would attempt such a perilous escape. Alara's escape attempt, though aborted, planted a seed of unease in Luna's heart that the safety of Castello Lycanara could no longer soothe. The young woman couldn't stop thinking about her sister, about the anguish that drove her to such a desperate act. That episode made her see that, despite all the luxury and care she received, there were still many loose ends in her life, and some of them seemed strangely too convenient. With her health restored by Dr. Isolde, and her mind sharpened by studies in the Royal Library, Luna began to see patterns, to notice small inconsistencies in the stories she was told about her father's debt. Her conversations with Dr. Isolde, previously focused only on her recovery and the mysteries of her lineage, now extended to the history of Eldoria, the kingdom of Eldoria's economy, and inevitably, tax policies. Luna, with her keen intelligence, began to draw parallels, to realize how Blackwood Hollow, being so isolated, seemed to have been the target of particularly rigorous, almost predatory scrutiny. She remembered Ray Lycan's smile in the snow, that glint in his eyes that seemed to see right through her, not with disdain, but with a strange anticipation. That wasn't the smile of a surprised king, but of someone who had been waiting for her. The realization dawned on her, slowly, painfully. One day, as Luna was flipping through old tax records in the Royal Library, searching for information on Eldoria's economic history, a task the king himself had encouraged, so she would better understand the kingdom that would one day be hers. She stumbled upon documents detailing Blackwood Hollow's collections in recent years. The numbers were strange. There was a sudden and inexplicable increase in taxes on certain goods and properties precisely in the months leading up to her father's debt collection. It was as if the rules had been changed, or applied with excessive and targeted rigor, almost as if deliberately, to crush the most vulnerable families. It wasn't just a debt. It was a trap. Luna's mind reeled. She remembered the king's words, how he watched her, how he knew about her illness and her family. He had said he wanted her, that he was waiting for her. But why like that? Why the manipulation? Rage began to boil within her, mixed with a sharp pang of betrayal. She felt her stomach churn. Gratitude for Alara's safety, for her own healing, for everything the king had provided her, now clashed with a profound sense of having been deceived, of being a pawn in a game she hadn't even known she was playing. That night, Luna couldn't sleep. The discovery had hit her like a lightning bolt, and the truth, as much as it freed her from ignorance, imprisoned her in a new layer of questions. She needed answers, and she needed them directly from the king. The next day, with a courage she didn't know she possessed, Luna went to confront Ray Lycan. He was in his study, an imposing room overlooking the mountains, reading documents by the light of a crackling fireplace. The mere sight of him, a tower of muscle and power, still intimidated her, but the fire in her eyes was stronger than the fear. "Ray Lycan," Luna began, her voice trembling, yet firm. He lifted his head, his golden eyes fixed on her, seeming to read her soul. He must have known what was coming. I have questions." He nodded, gesturing for her to come closer. "Ask, Luna. There are no secrets between mates." "No secrets?" she repeated, her voice gaining strength. "Then tell me, King, my father's debt, those taxes, was it all a coincidence? Or did you orchestrate everything? Did you manipulate the situation to bring me here?" The last sentence came out as a whisper, laden with pain and accusation. Silence filled the room, heavy and dense. Lycan didn't avert his gaze. He stood, and the proximity of his imposing figure made Luna take a step back, her heart beating wildly. But she didn't yield. She stared at him, demanding the truth. "Yes, Luna," he finally said, his voice deep and resonant, without any trace of remorse, only a brutal honesty. "I did. I orchestrated it. Every step, every detail of that debt was planned to bring you to me." The confession hit her with the force of a punch. Luna felt tears welling up, but she held them back, refusing to show weakness. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice broken. "You tricked me. You made me believe I was saving my sister when, in truth, I was just a pawn in your game." Ray Lycan's golden eyes softened, but the intensity of his gaze remained. "I watched you for months, Luna. Years. Since you were a small child, sick and fragile, but with a spirit that burned brighter than any star. You are my fated mate, my destiny, the other half of my soul. I knew you would never agree to be bought, never allow me to simply take you to Castello Licanara. Your pride, your sense of sacrifice. I needed a catalyst." He gave a step forward, and Luna did not back away this time. "I knew you would do anything for your sister, that only for her would you surrender yourself. I created the debt situation, because it was the only way to bring you into my care without you feeling you were losing your dignity, your freedom of choice. I needed you safe, Luna. I needed to heal you, to protect you. I would do anything to have you by my side, under my protection." "Even manipulate me?" she questioned, her voice laden with pain. "Even deceive me?" He extended his hand, and for a moment Luna thought he would touch her, but he stopped in midair, respecting the invisible barrier of her anger. "Yes. If it was the only way to have you, yes. My instinct, my mate bond, is older and stronger than any human law or morality you can understand. I have waited centuries for you. I couldn't risk losing you, couldn't risk you dying of your illness, or being taken by other dangers. My wolf wouldn't allow it." His brutal honesty was shocking, but also disarming. Lycan didn't try to justify, only to explain the depth of his obsession, the primordial force that drove him. Luna looked at him, and saw not just the feared king, but an ancient being, driven by a need as fundamental as breath itself. The rage was still there, a knot in her chest, but now it was mixed with a complex, almost overwhelming understanding. "And now?" Luna asked, her voice softer. "What do I do with this? With the truth that my salvation was a lie?" "You decide, Luna," he replied, his golden eyes fixed on hers. "I won't keep you here against your will, but know that every day I spent away from you was torture. Every day you spent sick, I felt your pain. I gave you a home, safety for your sister, healing for your illness, knowledge for your mind. I gave you everything I could, in the only way I knew you would accept. And I will continue to give you everything, if you allow me." The weight of his words hung in the air. Luna felt the conflict tearing her apart inside. He had deceived her, yes, but he had also saved her, saved Alara, saved herself. He had brought her into a world where she was valued, where her intellect was appreciated, where her health was a priority. She looked at the ray, at the intensity of his eyes, at the vulnerability contained within his confession, and realized that, behind the manipulation, there was an undeniable truth. He loved her, in his possessive and ancient way, but he loved her deeply. I don't know if I can forgive the manipulation," Luna began, her voice still choked. "But I cannot deny what you've done for me, for Alara. You gave us a new life, and I cannot deny that I feel something for you too, Ray Lycan. A bond that pulls me to you, even when my reason screams." He took the final step, and this time, he touched her. His strong, warm fingers enveloped her hand, and a wave of energy coursed through Luna's body. It was the mate bond, undeniable, pulsing between them. "I know my way of loving you was. imperfect, in your human eyes. But I swear, Luna, from now on, there will be no more secrets between us. I will earn your trust, one day at a time. I will show you that my love is worthy of your surrender, not your anger. I will be the mate you deserve, not the predator who tricked you. Luna looked at him, at the promise in his golden eyes. It was a risk, but life with him, despite the initial manipulation, had been the best she had ever known. She had found her voice, her strength, her purpose. And, truth be told, Lycan, the supreme alpha, the most feared being in Eldoria, seemed willing to bend for her, to learn to love in a way she could accept. I accept, she finally said, her voice firmer now. But on one condition, Lycan. Never again. Never again will you deceive me. Our mate bond will be built on truth, or there will be no bond at all. A slow, satisfied smile, now tinged with genuine tenderness, spread across his face. It was no longer the predatory smile from the snow, but that of a man who had found his way, however crooked, to his mate's heart. He pulled her gently closer, and Luna, for the first time, did not resist. She nestled against his massive chest, feeling his warmth and strength envelop her. Lord Valerius, who had tried several times to sow discord, realized that the union between Luna and the Ray was unbreakable. The king, with a glacial stare and a few direct words, made it clear that Luna was his mate, the future queen of Eldoria, and any threat to her would be met with the fury of an alpha. Valerius, cunning as he was, understood the message and retreated, his ambition forced to bow to the will of the Ray and his Luna. Ilara was brought to Castello Licanara a few weeks later, not as a prisoner or hostage, but as an honored guest. She thrived under the care of Dr. Isolda, who became a maternal figure for her, and Luna felt a profound peace seeing her sister safe and happy. Life in Castello Licanara wasn't just about power and intrigue. It was about love, loyalty, and building a new future. Luna, the girl who saw herself as useless, the sick woman who expected a dungeon, had become the silent force that balanced the power of the supreme alpha. She was the reason for his kindness, the light that guided the predator. Her journey, though initiated by cruel manipulation, had transformed into a story of self-discovery and love. She had found her voice and her courage, and now, beside her Lycan, she was ready to face any challenge the kingdom of Eldoria could present them, building a future where truth and love, even if born of a ruse, would prevail. After all, a love so ancient and profound, even if it started a little. Sideways definitely had the makings of forever.